Hello guys, Jayanam here with a new topic, a beginner's guide for getting started with 3D printing and Blender 2.8. The printer that I use is the Prusa i3 Mark III's, not assembled, and it takes quite a while to turn this kit into this 3D printer. I built this in about 6 hours and I highly recommend to do this instead of ordering the assembled version, because then you know your printer. After building this, I download the software for this printer. These are the drivers and the applications like the Prusaslicer. A slicer is a software that is used to convert a 3D model to specific instructions for your printer. I will show you how this works later on. The Prusaslicer is an open source software and you can see the full source code and download it from this Github. Of course you don't have to, you can just use the binary that is contained in the downloads. The first test print that I made is this tree frog that you find on the SD card that is shipped with the Prusa printer. I'm really happy with the quality, it's an amazing machine. Okay, now let's go to Blender 2.8 to this project with the human head that I sculpted. And I will show you now the basic steps to 3D print this mesh. The geometry is quite dense, you can see this here in the wireframe mode. And the bottom is flat, so that you can put the model, for example, onto your desk after printing. And what I want to show you now is a 3D printing add-on to check the quality of the mesh before you print it. Then I go to object mode because the panel of this add-on is visible only in object mode in the sidebar. And the add-on is called the 3D print toolbox. You can see this here in the preferences. It is an internal add-on. This means it comes with Blender, you just have to activate it here in the preferences. Okay, so let's have a look. The add-on is located in the sidebar, press N to open it, this panel, 3D print, and first of all I press the solid button to check if the mesh doesn't have any holes, if it is manifold. Because otherwise you run into problems when you want to print it. And for this mesh you can see we have no non-manifold edges. So that's fine, but if you found any non-manifold edges, you can press this button here to make the mesh manifold. The add-on contains many more checks that you can execute, but I won't go too much into detail for this, that's a beginner guide. But what I use for this add-on is the export feature. But we will come to this in a moment. Okay, now let's talk about meshes, because we want to know how big the mesh is before we print it. So we have this measure tool in Blender 2.8 and we can just drag out a line and you can see the size in that direction. Okay, we set the measure to centimeters and this is 1700 centimeters. That's way too big, but the trick is now to set the unit scale to 0.001. And the size that you can see then in centimeters is the one that you will see in the Prusaslicer. You'll remember the software that we will use in a moment to configure the printer instructions for this mesh. Alright, now the model is about 1.7 centimeters in height. That's a bit too small, so I will scale this up. I press the S key and type in multiply by 3. Then I press Ctrl and the A key and apply the scale. Okay, now let's drag this to the top of the head. And you can see the height is about 5.1 centimeters. That's okay for a test print. Great, and now we can go ahead and export this model as a so-called STL file. You can use the 3D print toolbox and just define the directory to which you want to export. The file name is built by the name of the project and the name of the object. That's one way to export this STL file. The other way is to go to File, Export, STL, and in this dialog you can define the file name as you like and the directory, of course. In most cases you want to export the active object, so select selection only, but don't check to take the scene unit into account, because then the size will be multiplied with the unit scale and your model will be too small. I use the add-on now to export as STL. This takes a while and then we open the Prusaslicer. Okay, after starting it you see virtual print bed. When you press the left mouse button down and move the mouse you can rotate the view, or holding the middle mouse button and move you pan the view. like in most 3D applications. And what I want to do now is I want to import the STL file. Okay, I press this button, and here we have the exported STL, which I open now, and then you can see the head on the print bed. Great. It has the correct size, you can see this here on the right side, 50 millimeters. And now let me show you the basic settings for getting started, really just the basics. We will go more into detail in a future tutorial. Okay, here in the panel we have Simple, Advanced and Expert. We just need the Simple tab in this tutorial. First of all, which printer we are using. I use the Prusa Mark III's. You can also add other printers here. Okay, so let me switch here to the printer settings. First of all, the layer height. When you print a model, it is printed from the bottom to the top in layers, layer by layer. You will see this more in detail in a moment. Another interesting setting is the size of the model's shells. I'm going to adjust this later on as well. Okay, but now let's come to the infill. This is what the printer is printing to the inside of the mesh, and you can define the pattern and the density here. For lower density you save material, but the printed model is less stable. Then you can define if you want to add a skirt or a brim, which are outlines on the lower layers of your prints, for instance to improve their adhesion on the print bed. The last point covers settings for the so-called support material, which is a kind of helper material that is printed for parts that have overhangs. I will explain this when we slice the mesh. I enabled the option here to generate this. Alright, the other settings are for the filament and other printing settings, and we keep these as they are. Okay, back to the 3D view and the print bed and the settings for the support material. As I mentioned, a model can have overhangs. I checked here to generate the support material everywhere, and this means the slicer will generate support material for parts of the mesh where it detects overhangs, for example here at the chin and at the ears. These are called overhangs because there's no material, no layer underneath, and the printer can't print this because it's not able to print in the air. So after slicing this, you can see these green parts, the support material that is generated. After the slicing you can see the print layers. You just have to drag down this slider and you get a preview of the layers and the infill of the mesh. So this is how the printer works. It starts here with the bottom layer and it is building the print layer by layer. We have an infill of 15%, and in the lower right hand corner in the panel you can see that it will print about 2.5 hours when using these settings. Okay, at this stage we will print the first layer of the ear, and as you can see we will need the support material because otherwise we would try to print this layer in the air somewhere, which is not possible. You can also hide the display of the support material here, and then you can see it better. For this getting started tutorial we will use auto generation for support material, but the slicer has features to add these manually to optimize the amount of used material and print time. Okay, now I'll go ahead and set the infill to 0, and each time you change a setting you have to slice again, and then you can see the head is hollow now. Okay, that's cool, but I think the walls, the vertical shells are a bit too thin, but I will change this in the printer settings. So here in the layers and perimeters, I set the ones of the vertical shells to 3. You can adjust the layer height here as well, for instance to add more detail to the print, which will lead to longer print times of course, or increase it for faster prints. Play around with this setting, find out what works best for you and for which kind of mesh, mesh size and material. For this print, I stick to the default setting of 0.15. Okay, so I slice again and have a look at the shells. These are thicker now and I think we can go with that. Okay, printing time. The model will print about 2 hours and 11 minutes, and about 3.1 meters of filament will be used. The material, by the way, is PLA from Prusa. Okay, now we are going to export the so-called G-code. This is a file that contains all the commands for the printer to print this model with the settings we made. And then I store it to the SD card that is shipped with the printer. After that, I insert the card to this slot of the printer, then use the menu to select the file for printing, and here we go. Okay, this is live speed, but I don't want to show you the full process. Let's see the result. Here we have it on the print bed. You can bend this a bit in both directions, up and down, and then you can easily remove it from the bed. And then you can remove the support material as well, which is pretty easy for this print. Okay, I'm quite happy with it. Also the details here around the ears and the nose come out pretty nice, although the print is really small. Okay guys, please let me know if you like the topic 3D printing and 3D printing with Blender, because then I will come up with more and more detailed tutorials. Please don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Follow me on my Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, support me as my patron if you like, and I see you soon here on Jayanam.